Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
Welcome to Mortification of Spin. My name's Carl Trueman. I am typically a professor at Grove City College, but for this academic year, I'm the Bush Family Visiting Research Fellow at the University of Notre Dame. And I'm here with my good friend and podcast partner, as always, the Reverend Todd Pruitt, pastor of Covenant Presbyterian Church in Harrisonburg, Virginia. That is a congregation of the esteemed Presbyterian Church in America. Yes. Good to see you again, Todd.
Good to see you, Carl. I've mentioned to people before how, since it's been clear that you and I are both in the process of becoming completely bald, in recent months, you've just gone ahead and committed totally.
I did, yes.
And just shaved off the remaining kind of siding you had on the side of your head. Yep. That's all gone. But the thing that I really noticed today as I'm watching you here via Zoom is that you have enough substance in your eyebrows that if you were to have that surgically replanted, you might have something going there.
Actually, they're not eyebrows. They're a couple of furry caterpillars I stick on each morning. So I'm thinking of growing them out and sweeping them back to sort of cover the pace.
I like that. And then you know, you and I are both the same age. We're getting at that age we can start talking about ear hair as well.
Yeah, so. That's true. And nasal hair, even less tasteful. we were born just days apart, actually.
We were. Yeah, and something good was going on in the world.
It was, and we married our beloved wives just a few weeks apart. So our lives have been eerily parallel since
I'm Scottish. You're English.
You're Scottish. You're an ancestor of John Knox. I'm ancestor of nobody of any particular note whatsoever. So it's but great to see you. And of course, we have, as always, we have an excellent guest with us today. He's an old friend of mine. I've had much to do with over the years. He'll be well known to many of our listeners. It is John Stonestreet, who is the president of the Colson Center, the daily voice of Breakpoint, which is a nationally syndicated commentary on culture, which was started by, of course, Chuck Colson, after whom the center is now named. He's co-authored a number of books. And I noticed from his most recent bio that he's an ordained deacon in, get this, Todd, the Anglican Diocese of All Nations.
Wow.
That's like saying an ordained deacon in the church of the entire universe, as I know. So John is an extremely important guy. We have a representative here of the empire, if I could put it that way. If you're listening to us on Mars, this man is one of your deacons. So it is, hey, great to have you with us, John.
It's the Diocese of All Nations, not the Diocese of All Planets. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Here's a random truth about the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. When the guys first met to choose our name, I believe somebody came up with the idea of calling it the True Presbyterian Church of the World. This is like 8 guys in Philadelphia.
That sounds like a few Philadelphia guys.
It sounds like a few Presbyterian guys. That's for sure. Like I know I'm supposed to say like it's so great to be on, but after this opening, I'm not real sure that I want to commit to that. Although, hey, Todd, I will tell you, I didn't know you were in Harrisonburg, Virginia. I mean, since we're just kind of naming as many denominations as we can.
Yeah.
I spent my freshman year in Harrisonburg, Virginia at Eastern Mennonite College.
Really?
Believe it or not. Yes. Not because I was Mennonite, but because I loved basketball and I was also short and slow, and they let me play there. And anyway, I grew up not too far from there.
I joke with people that when when I'm doing sermon prep in one of the local coffee shops, and I'm sitting next to two people that are kind of college age, and their rhetoric is especially left wing, I go, Eastern Mennonite students.
Hey, I distinctly remember the motto of the college, and including the banner that was in the chapel, said, "Thy word is truth." And the very first class I was forced to take was an Intro to New Testament class, where they taught us distinctly that the miracles have been fabricated in the Gospels to embellish the Jesus story. So it was. I mean, this was back in the '90s. You know, they were liberal and progressive before it was cool for Christian colleges to do that, and they were an early adopter, I guess you could say. Anyway, it's a beautiful part of the world. It's a beautiful part of the country. That's for sure.
It is. You come on back. We'll take you.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you on, John. And we actually brought you on not to talk about the Shenandoah Valley, but to talk about a remarkable new documentary that you're involved with. I think none of our listeners will be unaware of the fact that Western culture in general, and perhaps American culture in particular, is at something of a crossroads at the moment. I know the term crisis is massively overused, but it's very hard not to look at some of the things that are happening in the world around us and think that we're not at some kind of crisis point, when the question, what is a woman, becomes highly contested. Something fundamental is going on in our culture. And of course, the Colson Center is one of the leading lights, Christian-wise, in the United States for addressing not just the symptoms that we face day to day as Christians, the symptoms of this crisis, but the underlying causes and trends. And the Colson Center is joined together with Focus on the Family to produce what I would describe as a remarkable new documentary entitled Truth Rising. It's an impressive piece of work. The guides on this documentary are John Stonestreet himself and Os Guinness. So that is the caliber of production we're looking at in terms of the minds that are guiding this, and numerous what we might call captains of culture or influential cultural figures. Sir Niall Ferguson, for example, his wife, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, interviewed in the course of this documentary. And it's really geared towards helping Christians think about how the world around them operates and how they, even in their small worlds and with the limited influence they have, can think critically about how to engage with those around them. So it's a pleasure to have you on, John. Thanks so much for doing this. I wonder if you could start by giving our listeners just a very brief overview of the content of the documentary and the kind of 2 or 3 things that you really hope those watching it will take away.
Yeah. Well, listen, there's a history both from the Colson Center and Focus on the Family of trying to help Christians understand the cultural moment they're in, understand the ideas in particular that are at work, countering a Christian worldview, the other worldviews that are colliding there, and then kind of asking that question. I mean, you remember the question Chuck Colson asked, "How now shall we live?" And the title of his book with Nancy Pearcey, he was putting himself distinctly in that category with Francis Schaeffer, who also asked, "How then shall we live?" In fact, we thought about naming this project that, but there were no more adverbs to be applied, so we had to go with something else. But there's also the reality that those guys were so prophetic. I mean, you say that the word crisis, has been applied to all kinds of things, but there has been a sense for a long time that the modern world was having a profoundly dehumanizing effect on people, that there was going to be a real collision of ideas. And it's reached this kind of existential point of reality. I mean, think about when you have something like abortion, and 2 sides looking at the same thing, one side calling it life-saving health care for the mother, and the other side calling it the destruction of preborn lives. I mean, we're not talking about different things. We're not talking about barely different definitions of what this is. We're talking about completely different understandings of reality. And the depth of that disagreement was on full display in recent weeks with Charlie Kirk. We have one side celebrating it and one side, mourning it. I mean, the divide is so deep. And so understanding really what's underneath this is what the film was all about. But even more than that, and this is really where our interest comes in, I am absolutely convinced that Christians need to embrace this time and place that we're in as their calling. We think about calling as Christians being to a job or to a ministry or to an act of kindness or something like that, which is all true. But God has also called us to a particular time and place in history. And that moment that he's called us to is part of the overarching redemptive story by which he is making all things new. And so being able to get our bearing at a time like this is really important, but then also asking that question, how should we live? How should we live? What kind of life is being required of us in this time and place? And the punchline there is a life of truth and courage. In other cultures, you don't have the level of deception that you do in ours, or the level of kind of divergence of ideas. You asked this great, Carl, in the opening of your magisterial work on expressive individualism, where you're like, look, the question isn't how do people say that I was born into the wrong body. It's how is it that people now say it and everyone doesn't immediately dismiss it as something sad, absurd, and a product of mental illness. And that's the chaos of the moment, I think, that we're in. And are Christians ready for it? Are Christians understanding their calling to it? That's what the project is really all about.
As a local church pastor in a university community, and John, as we've already mentioned, you're familiar with Harrisonburg. One of the things that we are seeing in our church is something that is happening across the U.S., as recent studies have shown, and not just the U.S., but parts of Western Europe as well, which is this, the fastest growing demographic age-wise of people starting to come back to the church are people in their 20s.
Amazing.
And of those, it's the young men. For the first time since this has been studied, more young men are attending church than young women. That's remarkable. Before we started recording, you had made this comment related to the fact something's going on here. And I said that recently to several of our elders over a meal. I said, I try not to get hyped up on things. But this is different from what I've seen so far in close to 4 decades in church ministry. And we're seeing this in our church. So all these young men, we have more students now in our church than in the 12 previous years since I've been the pastor here. And they are saying so many of the same things in terms of what they're hungry for, what they're desiring. And it's all related to things like truth. That's an encouraging thing that I'm hoping the church will seize upon with a great deal of enthusiasm.
Look, the opportunity is unbelievable. And even as we were working on this project, the beginning of it kind of predates this kind of new rise of spirituality, or what Justin Brierley has called a quiet revival, or the Bible Society, I think in UK, coined that phrase first. But you're exactly right. I mean, in the Anglican Church, I spoke at 2 different synods, which and then even in our church as well, there's a whole row at all 3 of these events where there's a whole row of young men that are there, kneeling, bowing, serious, wanting to ask theological questions. Some are, pursuing holy orders. It's just really a remarkable thing. And of course, people have mentioned that. And think about how crazy this is, to be in this moment, Todd, because we're all here old enough, especially you guys, to remember, just yesterday when we were talking about the rise of the nuns. And particularly in the United States, this was the spiritually unaffiliated, many of whom were really trying to shake off their baggage of the church. Now we're talking about a group of young men who are, re-embracing this exploration of truth and Christianity, not the popular stuff either. I mean, you're seeing doctrinally serious people or churches attracting these individuals, and some of them are trying to shake off the baggage of secularism. Right. And look, I think it is a critical time. That's why I think the title Truth Rising, it wasn't what I chose at the beginning, but it's growing on me because we are seeing this incredible difference. And the temptation is for Christians, because we live in a cultural moment, all of us do, every person lives in a cultural moment, is to define reality from that cultural moment. And what we really want to do is define the moment from the reality of the story. And we need that stability. And that stability has been lacking, I think, among Christians. I think there's a real crisis of confidence that you can see, right? I mean, if somebody comes up to me and wants to fight over whether the earth is flat or round, I don't get really worked up about that, right? I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to be ashamed or afraid to say what I believe. But that's been the dominant response on issues of sexuality, morality, truth from a lot of Christians for a long time, which tells me many of us stop seeing Christianity as truth. Of course, that's what Schaeffer was telling us to do. That's what Del Tackett was telling us to do. That's what Carl's been telling us to do. That's what, Chuck Colson in his raspy voice, truth. So we're really saying the same thing. I just think that we have moved into this kind of moment of existential reality where the things that were theoretical yesterday are now kind of actual today. And then again, we got to take seriously this thing. Paul says this to the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers, that God determines the exact times we live in the boundaries of our dwelling place. So why are we in this time and place? Why are you in the Shenandoah Valley there? Carl, why are you in that with a bunch of young men, college students? And you've been seeing kind of prerequisites, I guess, of this trend that we're talking about here at Grove City for a while. Probably you're seeing it at Notre Dame as well now in the semester you're spending there. It's an amazing time. But the church has been so much on its heels, and I just, man, what would it be if Truth Rising could be used by God to just shore up Christians, just shore up 100 more Christians, 1,000, more churches, something like that. I mean, it would just be a remarkable thing, and that's really what we're praying for.
Yeah. How do we avoid, John? One of the things that's concerning me at the moment is that we can tend as Christians to zero in on symptoms without really spotting the underlying causes and problems. And I would use transgenderism as a good example. There's a lot of triumphalism at the moment in Christian circles and in conservative political circles relative to the transgender question, mainly because the current administration in the United States has signed some orders that have clearly pushed back on the transgender question, and there is this vibe shift against it, and I think that's certainly to be welcomed. But I look at a figure like Elon Musk, for example, and Musk was instrumental, I think, in shaping the Trump administration's policies on gender in a very good way. I give thanks to Elon Musk's role in that, even as I'm very sad for the tragic personal circumstances that led him to be so concerned. On the other hand, I think a figure like Elon Musk is really part of the problem because he's pressing transhumanism. And the trans problem is not really a gender problem. It's manifested as that. It's really a humanist problem. What does it mean to be human? And I rejoice at young men particularly getting involved in doctrinally and for want of a better, liturgically serious Christian traditions. They're not wanting the light consumerist road. They're wanting a road that is in some ways hard and sacrificial. On the other hand, society continues apace at demolishing what it means to be human. How do we get people to realize that, and what kind of resistance can we mount to that? Because we're all so deeply, I take Paul Kingsnorth's comments about the machine, etc. But the problem is that most, if not all of us, are so deeply embedded in the technological world that living in a cottage in the middle of nowhere in Ireland just isn't an option for us. And if you do that, you're actually depending on people living in the cities doing stuff on your behalf.
Right.
How shall we then live in a world where the very tools of existence are becoming dehumanizing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're asking exactly, as I understand the right question. I have the same mixed feelings about the so-called vibe shift on a number of levels. One is I think the vibe shift that we have seen is probably by and large at least recognizing the consequences and maybe even at times the victims of our bad ideas, which is good because that's way better than pretending they're not at bad ideas or that they're somehow good ideas. But that's not the same thing as reattaching to truth. That's not the same thing as rebuilding. That's not the same thing in terms of what, all the rewords that the New Testament authors use to talk about what Christ actually came to do, renew and restore and redeem and reconcile. And that's the kind of thing that we actually need. It's progress, as Peter Kreeft said, when you're standing on the edge of the moral abyss, to go backwards instead of going forwards. That's progress, but it's not enough. And one of the things that we did in the Truth Rising film, Carl, which I hope speaks to this, at least it does as I see it, is that whereas Schaeffer and Colson, answered the how now shall we live and how then shall we live questions by describing it. Schaeffer talked a lot about integrity. Colson, talked a lot about, cultivating a Christian worldview, things like that. All that's true. Truth Rising highlights 5 stories of people that I think exemplify this. I think exemplify this in very different ways. Their stories are interesting and remarkable, unexpected at times. First of all, Chloe Cole. Here's Chloe, one of the victims of this terrible idea of our society that you can be born into the wrong body. And what's fascinating, to the point where she had a double mastectomy at age 16, and she was brought back to the truth about her body before she was brought to the truth about who God is. It's a fascinating difference. And I think it speaks to your question, because we were told that if we deal with all this political stuff, then we're going to get in the way of people finding the truth of the gospel. We're going to offend them and we're going to turn them off. She's the exact opposite. She came to the truth about herself before she came to the truth about Christ. I think we can see the same kind of pushback, at least to some sort of degree, on the kind of this massive, what really was the largest evangelistic event in human history on Sunday. I don't know when this is going to air, but when we're recording it, it was Kirk's memorial. And, we were told too, get too political, you're going to get in the way of the gospel. Now, is it quite possible to get too political and get in the way of the gospel? Absolutely. Of course it is. But to attach ourselves to what's true and to talk about the fullness of the truth of God's word and not hide, and that sort of thing. I think that's a big part of this. I think also you have a story like Jack Phillips. That's another story that's told. Jack didn't plan to go out and be a hero. He didn't plan to go out. He lived his life differently. If he had decided to bake that cake, no one would have ever known. And the next 13 years of his life probably would have been a lot more peaceful. But you do the right thing because it's the right thing, and then you leave the results up to God.
Yeah.
That's Jack's story, And you think about all the ways, and this is where I think Paul Kingsnorth's lines are somewhat helpful. We are going to have to engage technology differently as individuals. Our habits with technology are going to have to be different. Our engagement with social media and that sort of thing is going to have to be different. Now, I could go down the line. Ayaan Hirsi Ali's story is unbelievable. That's told in the film. It's really a remarkable part of this project. And also Katie Faust and Seth Dillon. But I think the punchline here, in my mind, Carl, is this. That it's going to have to begin by not being satisfied with just a kind of a political backpedaling that we've seen in our culture, but for the church, in Chuck's word, to be the church, to reattach itself to what is actually true. It doesn't get around that. You can't get to step 2 until you get to step 1. And step 1 is recognizing what is true. We have a follow-up study as well on this Truth Rising project after the documentary. And the documentary really, I think, is to inspire people to be excited about engaging this cultural moment. The study walks through the 4 ingredients of courage that we need, the 4 ingredients, and that is all truth. It's truth about our moment, and that's a segment on hope, not despair. The truth about reality, and that's understanding Christianity not just as a set of truths, but the truth about everything. And then identity. Look, image of God is the most theologically neglected point of catechism I think there is. I think it's fascinating. You look back in our creeds, and there's not a lot about identity, not a lot about image of God. And of course, the answer is because it was not debated. It wasn't. Right. We didn't have a bunch of heretics running off the reservation on this, and now we do. And so the truth about what it means to be human has to be an essential aspect of us knowing what's true and embracing what's true in our lives. We got to get to the image of God beyond a bit of trivia. I mean, I think if you went from church to church and said, hey, everybody fill in the blank humans are, and they would all say the right answer, made in the image of God. But when you said, well, what is that? What difference does that make? Why is that so important? There's just a real failure of catechism here. And I think it's a real opportunity as well.
Got a book on that coming out next spring, John. Just a quick plug for myself.
Of course you do. You're always skating to where the puck is going. That's right. By the way, that's a hockey reference if you didn't know that, Carl.
I think opportunity is a great way to describe it. One things that Carl and I have talked about in the past has been how the current set of crises that we see, of course, chief among them is this idea of transgenderism. But these current crises seem to be kind of the pebble in the shoe that has been causing a lot of people to finally start asking metaphysical questions. And whether you're talking about people like Mary Harrington over in the UK, who, as far as I know, is still not a Christian, but she keeps getting pushed in that direction to the point where she's been even attending, I think, Carl, you might help. Is she the one who now calls herself religious but not spiritual?
I'm not sure. I believe she attends an Anglican church regularly.
Right, and
whether she now professes faith, I don't know, but I do believe she claims to be an Anglican.
The most recently I'd heard her, she said, we're attending an Anglican church. I've become religious, but I'm not sure if I believe yet. The point is that she wasn't saying that 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Along with another of other kind of public intellectuals we can name. We think about over here in the U.S. with New Discourses, James Lindsay, who was a confirmed atheist a few years ago, and now at minimum he's really close to embracing. Like he is reading the Bible, he is studying the Bible, and it's been the metaphysical agitation that these crises have provided that are pushing people to say, I've got to think about the deeper issues now.
These are incredible moments. This is an incredible moment. And I think that it underscores the fact that as good as an individual gets and as good as a society can get to suppress the truth and kind of the way that Romans 1 describes, the truth is still there. It doesn't change the truth. And it's like that, the analogy of the beach balls underneath the water. You can push them down, but those darn things keep popping up. Right. So, Todd, the story in the documentary that reflects this is the story of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. So, again, we have the first part of the film, which is narrated by Os Guinness through the story of Western culture, trying to explain what's happened. By the way, an incredible part of that is Oz's own personal story watching the Chinese Communist Revolution, which is an incredible part, which I didn't even. I've known Oz for a long time, but didn't even know that. But, so Oz, who kind of plays this Gandalf role in the film, right, guiding us through this kind of journey. And we had this list of thought leaders, many of whom were these folks who had been thinking and writing about civilizations. I mean, Ferguson, Neil Ferguson, he actually wrote the book called Civilizations. Right. And Ayaan was part of the thought leader group there, along with Baroness Philippa Stroud and David Berlinski, clearly not a man of faith, but people of faith and not faith that are describing this. And Ayaan is in this group. Well, and near the end of the first interview with her, she kind of telegraphs that this thing that she is claiming, and of course, at that point, she had come public talking about secularism wasn't going to bring the meaning that the Western world needed. And she kind of talked about cultural Christianity, and people thought that that's what she was kind of advocating for. She kind of telegraphed that this was personal. And we had some other folks share that with us. And so we asked her to come back and tell her own testimony. And listen, it's remarkable. I mean, she's one of the ones that was in the group that a generation ago was telling us that God is a delusion and religion poisons everything.
Close to the new atheists.
Exactly.
That's right. She was the female.
was.
And of course, her journey is remarkable because she came out of a radical Islamic background, then became a rabid atheist secularist, making fun of religion. The fatwa for her life was stuck to the knife that went into Theo Van Gogh's body for the film that they had made together. And then she has this remarkable conversion. And Ayan is, to me, the example in the film that when we talk about truth, listen, our ability to engage this cultural moment well doesn't rest on our ability to engage this cultural moment well. It's that truth is reliable. Truth is solid. And it's solid for our civilization, and it's solid for her personally. And it is a remarkable thing. There's this great moment where she looks at the camera and she says, listen, at the end of the day, and I'm putting words in her mouth here, but I spent my life looking for freedom. What was really going to be the source of freedom? And I'm finally free. And her eyes light up, and it's just the beauty of Jesus working in somebody's heart and life. And then you realize the ramifications of this are as big as civilization itself. That is, to me, the story. And a lot of this, these developments happened as we were making this project and working on this. And it should just give you more and more confidence that Christianity is true with a capital T. It's reliable. And that we can stand on that and leave the rest up to God. God can be trusted with this.
Yeah. That's a great kind of way to bring this particular conversation to a close, because earlier you had mentioned hope. Hope is such a better concept than optimism. Optimism can come and go. Things might get harder before they get better, so we don't have to. Hope is much more resilient and much more rugged and much deeper than mere optimism. And hope is what Christians have uniquely. And I would encourage our listeners to go to our website, mortificationofspin.org. You're going to see a link there to the Colson Center, and particularly to this wonderful documentary that they have produced called Truth Rising. If you follow me on Facebook, I've put some links there. I link to the Breakpoint stuff all the time. So I've been a long-term appreciator of the content that the Colson Center produces. If you want just regular, good, encouraging doses of truth and good biblical counsel connected to all kinds of things that we are having to encounter today, Breakpoint's a great place to go. You can like it on your Facebook page and get those regular updates. They'll be encouraging to you. Listen to Breakpoint when you get a chance. It's always great, reliable content. And of course, our guest has been John Stonestreet, who is the president of the Colson Center, which is just a terrific ministry. And their track record for producing outstanding material is great. And John, we're really thankful that we were able to spend some time with you today. Appreciate you coming on.
Hey, listen, it meant a lot to be on here. I'm a fan of the podcast and grateful for the work that you guys do. And thanks for getting the word out about Truth Rising in the Colson Center. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, happy to do it. Well, folks, thank you all for joining us today. Again, go to our website, check out Truth Rising. Again, and it's Colson Center's made this stuff available for us. They want it out there, and it's getting out there. This is going to be great stuff to watch as a family. Great stuff to do in a small group for your church. All kinds of venues you can get this. Have an unbelieving friend who's a little curious. Sit down with you. Watch this. It'd be terrific for people who are kind of biting at the edges of faith. This would be a terrific tool for you to use. Sit down with them and discuss it. So,
one quick addition, actually, Todd. People might also want to look into the Colson's Fellow program. I've got a number of friends who've done that, and that's a fairly intensive training program which allows you to get into the kind of issues that Truth Rising raises in much more depth. So just going to give you a bit of free advertising there, John. Throw that out. Look into the Colson Fellows.
That's the Colson Fellows program. There are members of my church that have gone through the Colson Fellows program.
It's a good program.
Who speak very highly of it. So, again, the Colson Center is a great partner to the church, helping to provide just great content for Christians. And so, really appreciate the conversation today. Well, next time, we hope that you listeners will join us again for Mortification of Spin. And until then, we'll talk to you soon.
So this is what the truth feels like. This is more of what I had in mind. Yeah, this is what the truth feels like. And I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Something about this just feels so right. Alright. Something about this just feels so right. Alright. So this is what the truth feels like. And I'm feeling it.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.